38 items. 38. What is going on, YouTube? Hope you guys are doing fantastic today. And today we're going over the items because you guys asked for a little bit of an item counter build cheat sheet, I guess. I'm gonna try to just go through every item, tell you when I would buy it, why I would buy it, and some examples if I can think of any. Some of these items are obviously really bad right now, but think if these items get buffed, this is the scenario I would build them in. For example, starting with Stone of Binding, 25 power, 30 prots of each, 10 MP5. Successfully hitting an enemy god with crowd control will place a debuff on the enemy, reducing their magical and physical protection by 10 for 5 seconds. So it statted pretty well. It's more of a bridge item, 1700 gold. When you see these cheap items like this, these bridge items, Ichval used to be one, Aussie used to be one, but they've been removed. These are these early game items that are meant to get you that like first little lead. Like if you're farming evenly or you're a little ahead, a little behind, this will give you that first burst of power. You compare this to any other item in the game. Stats wise, it's statted, I mean, okay, it's not statted great or anything, but 25 power, a good amount of power for 1700 gold, a good amount of prots, some MP5. It's nice. What it's lacking is it's lacking HP 5 for the early game. If you go binding and the enemy goes Manticore, they're getting extra damage in the form of the passive instead of getting power. And then they're getting more prots, they're getting more health, they're getting more MP5, and it's not that much more expensive. So when you think of Stone of Binding, what does this item entail? You want to win the early game. This is an item you build when your entire comp needs you to win your 2v2 in duo lane. And even then right now, I think it's not even the best option. I think you're better off usually just waiting for renewal or you're waiting for Manticore, because this item gives you 500 gold advantage on a Manticore. It gives you 650 on Thebes, and it gives you 700 on Mail of Renewal. So it gives you, I mean, 500 to 700 gold advantage. But as soon as that 500 to 700 gold advantage is up, they're going to be having full renewal, full Manticore, and you're going to be having binding with a tier 1 item. That's why it's kind of not really getting bought right now. Maybe if it sees some love. I don't know exactly what you'd want to do with this, because if you give it health, I think it is pretty significantly better. If you give it more pen, it's going to be pretty significantly better. And then if you just adjust the power, the prots a little bit, I think it doesn't really do anything. But even then, the passive on it is kind of useless. So you're just building it as a stat stick. And if you compare the stat stick of this with Manticore, Manticore's is just a lot better. Only time I'd really buy this if you need to win the 2v2. And currently right now, even then, I don't think it's that good. But in a world where it's buffed, that's when you'd want to build it. Wingblade. Wingblade is very, very good as a 5th item, 6th item when you already have enough prots to live their initial burst, and you just need some movement speed to get away from either their horrific, some sort of slow that they have, like Atlas Dash or Anubis 3, something like that, where if you get hit by this slow, there's a good chance that you die. Ring Toss, something like that. Wingblade in its current state is fine. I would definitely put it on like the lower end, like a more of a C tier item. It's statted pretty poorly. It's cheap though, and that's kind of like the upside of it. And slows are a really strong thing in Smite, so it's always going to have like a place in the meta. If you do get slowed and you die, a lot of the times if you're playing like Ymir or Ares, Wingblade is actually a pretty good item. If you're thinking about building this item, will you die if you don't have the movement speed? A lot of the times currently right now, no. You should just build Renewal, because that'll just give you a lot of extra fight potential, because you're going to get a burst to heal, you're going to have better stats, it's going to be only slightly more expensive, and it's just going to give you better all-around survivability. So currently, I wouldn't look towards Wingblade, but in the late game, you're playing Ymir, you're playing Ares, and you just need that little bit of burst of movement speed to kind of live a fight. I think it's a fine pickup. Relic Dagger. Relic Dagger isn't really a counter build item unless you're playing against an Odin or a Yamoja or a Ymir and you need your Phantom Shell up as much as you possibly can. That is the only time I would really look for it. It's statted fine. It's not a rush item. It's more of a second item, but it's really cheap. And then the stats on it are weird. 350 health is great, but then you look at cooldown reduction of 10%, that's fine. 10% CCR is pretty irrelevant. 7% movement speed is meh, and then the passive is fine. But still, you have to compare this to the other items you'd get in the spot. As a second item, because this is not a rush item, second item, you're comparing it to Blessed, Manticore, Renewal, Sov, Heartward. There are so many items that just kind of do what you need to be done a little bit more. If you are reliant on your relics, though, Relic Dagger will be a nice addition in the second slot, like for Phantom Shells and stuff like that. Shield of Regrowth. Shield of Regrowth is more of a... It's kind of like a meme item, but not really, because it's strong and it's a memery, if that makes sense. It's something you want to build if you're relying on being slippery instead of tanky, and your kit has a lot of stuff in it besides damage. If you look at like the gods that buy this, Naja, Hercules, Sobek, sometimes even Sylvanas, their kits kind of get improved through this movement speed. Hercules is then able to use his 1 as a dash. His or his one as a safety measure instead of having to dash in or blink in to get closer. Nausea can then look to just harass you a little bit more, poke you a little bit, out trade, and then he uses the stats on this pretty well. Sobek, same thing. You can kind of use your heal to catch up to people and then pluck them away, or you can use it to get away. And it just makes you a lot safer, a lot more aggressive. It's more of a second slotted item, but like, oh, Horus is another one. I want to point out Horus because I think Horus is pretty good with this item. This one's more of a, does your god use this item than a counter pick or counter item. It's not something you look at the enemy team and you're like, I need shield to regrowth this game, because it's not movement immunity or slow immunity. It's just a movement speed burst. So no really counter pick ability with this item, but it is something good if your god uses it well. Emperor's Armor. I don't think I've talked about this item enough, because I think currently this might be one of the best ranked items in the game. There's 4 scenarios where this item is good. You're behind, you're getting smashed, and they're diving, and they're not hitting the tower because they're ahead. That Phoenix is going to do a lot of damage. You're ahead, you're snowballing. You want to be diving the Phoenixes, the towers. You reduce the tower's damage because it actually does a lot of damage now, and you actually just live through it. There's the other 2 sides. I got just confused, but yeah, it's just really good because you can play around the objectives, or play around the towers. It's statted really well. It's very cheap. Not a first item buy, but a second, third, fourth, fifth item buy. I think it's actually very good. If you're planning on playing super aggressive or playing super defensive, Emperors is very good. Are a lot of fights taking place in the jungle? If they are, Emperors will be a little bit worse. But if you're looking to siege, Emperors will get a lot better. Witchblade. This one's probably one of the easiest counter pick items to like think about because it's just so self-explanatory. It reduces the enemy attack speed by 25%. Very effective in the early game. Gets a little bit worse in the late game. But 25% to, say you're around 5 enemies, is 125% attack speed reduced on the entire enemy team. So even in a scenario like that, where they only have 1 auto attacker in their hunter, their jungler is still going to have 25% less attack speed when he's looking to kill you. Their warrior is, their solo laner, their mid laner can do objectives slower or autos you down slower when they're playing around their abilities. Their guardian can't hit you as much. So even though it is mostly to stop auto attackers or to slow them down, it's still just effective against the entire enemy team. The only problem with Witchblade is it's not statted great. 30 protections, 250 health, 10% cooldown, 7% movement speed. It's okay. It's not great, it's okay, but it's cheap, and that's kind of the positive of it. It makes it more of a solo lane item where you can kind of use your lead and your base protections to kind of make you safer, and then you have the attack speed reduction to make up for it a little bit more. If they have 2 auto attackers on the enemy team, the item might feel pretty safe to build, might feel pretty good. But if you compare it to where it's going to be getting built, probably second item, a lot of the times you're just getting more value from Sov. Sov is going to be giving protections to your teammates and HP 5 to your teammates. It's also statted, I wouldn't say a lot better, but like a good chunk better. You're getting 55 physical protections, 250 health. This is 250 health, only 30 protections, and then cooldown movement speed. So while Sov is kind of like the which one would you rather have, because it's both like team fight and against physicals or against like kind of like the entire enemy, you're kind of comparing these two when you want them. Do you want the HP 5 and the sustain a little bit more, or do you want the enemy's burst down and the enemy's consistent damage down a little bit? Actually, we'll skip Contagion quick since we've already talked about Sov, started talking about it. This item's just a really good rush item because HP 5 in the early game is absolutely insane. With just this item, not considering your base HP 5 or Benevolence HP 5 or Thebes HP 5, you're getting 7 health every second. Say you're at about 70 with your Thebes or your Renewal or whatever, you're going to be getting 14 health every second, which is going to be helping you and your team immensely because you're going to be giving that to your teammates. Also, it makes objectives a little bit easier to do because it's giving protections to your entire team, and then it's also giving you that HP 5 heal. It does fall off a little bit late game because what's more effective late game? 25% attack speed reduction or 7 health every second and 15 procs to your teammates. So while Witchblade does fall off a little bit late game against ADCs, it is still very good against the entire enemy team fight, while Sov is a little less great. Contagion. Does the enemy team have healing, and do you want to stop some of their healing? It's fine. The item is just pretty bad right now because if you look at the way anti-heal works, Brawlers, Tainted, Onk, Toxic Blade, Divine are all just better items than Contagion and Pesty. So we'll talk about Contagion and Pesty at the same time quick. They're both statted really well, but their passives are just mostly irrelevant. When it comes down to what is worth more to your team and to the enemy team, them getting their healing reduced by 25%, or you getting an extra 20% cooldown from Breastplate of Valor, or anti-crit from Spectral, or Sov's HP 5 and 15 protections, or Witchblade's attack speed reduction. Contagion just doesn't really stack up. It is cheap, and that's why I've sometimes bought it if the enemy team has like 3 or 4 or 5 healers. That aura is actually really helpful. But most of the time, you're better off having an Onk and just having your other teammates buy anti-heal. If this does get a small buff, maybe its stats get even better, or the anti-heal aura gets better, or something like that. or just reworked entirely. We might have to come back to this conversation. But currently right now, I would not recommend building Contagion unless they have 4 or 5 healers. Oni Hunter's Garb. This is the, I want to be as tanky as possible in one item for as cheap as possible. That's what you have to think about Onis as. It's going to give you 200 health, very good. 60 protections, very good. 30 MP5, very good. 20 CCR, very, very good. And then you're getting mitigation when the enemy team is around you. So this item is now statted well, cheap, and it scales well into the late game. It's perfect as a, I want to be tanky and I want to do it really cheap. There's only one item that does this better than this item, and we'll talk about it later. A big fight between these two groups of believers in their items, but Onis is just the cheaper option, and that's why sometimes I think it's better, especially if you support that 200 gold actually means a lot, and sometimes the MP5 is needed also, but Onis, pretty good. And just to like kind of put it out there, it's good against all types of damage, because even though it's 60 MP5 or 60 magical protections and 0 physical, you're getting mitigation against the physical also. So while it is just magical showing, it is going to be reducing the physical damage that you're taking also. Heartward Amulet. This is the, they have multiple magical gods on their team, and we are going to be grouping to fight against them. That's what this item does, and it does it very, very well. 70 magical protections, 250 health, and it gives you MP5 to your entire team, and then also magical protections to your entire team. If they have a Zhang solo, if they have a Cthulhu solo, if they have Artio solo, Heartward's going to get a lot more value. If they have like a Guardian support, Guardian solo, magical mid, Heartward has a lot more value. A lot of the time you have to compare it is it worth more getting Heartward or getting Shoguns for the team fight, getting Oni Sigils for this, or Oni's Hunters for the team fight, Genjis for the team fight. It kind of just comes down to what one helps your team more. And we'll talk about the other options when we get there. Spectral. Another very easy one to talk about. Statted very well. If they're building crit on 1 or 2 characters, 100% buy this item. Very good stats, very cheap, easy to understand. Do they have crit? Build Spectral. Celestial Legion. Also another one that kind of got a sneaky buff in it that nobody really noticed is it reduces physical damage from physical critical strikes. So not Olorun by 4%, and it gives 5 stacks. So if you take 5 autos with this item, you're reducing 4% every time, or sorry, 20% down to 16, down to 12, 8, 4, and then 0. And then this also is giving you physical protections on top of that for every stack also. This item is in a spot where it's just outstatted kind of by other items. Comparing it to just Jade right off the bat, an item we'll get to later, the base stats of Jades are just better. This one you're getting no health. Keep in mind, physical protections are not good unless you have health to pair with them. Or I should say they're not good. They're a lot worse unless you have physical or health to pair with them. 30 physical protections, and then 35 from the passive that get removed every time you get hit. 65 before you get hit one time is good. It's not bad. It's not bad. But then you compare this one to 50 at all times, also giving you health, also giving you CCR, and also reducing their physical power. It just doesn't hold up. This item had a niche in solo lane for spammable warriors like Artio, where they go Breastplate into Celestial, and then they just have a lot of health. I mean, they have a lot of physical protections, a lot of magical power, a lot of MP5 to just spam abilities. I think it's still fine in a spot like that, but now the stats don't really match up to make it worth, and I think now there's just better items to build. Lotus, kind of the same thing as Celestial. It's just been nerfed a few too many times, and I think it's kind of just getting overlooked now because of the stats. It's a rush item, so you're getting it first item, maybe second on some gods, but it's giving you solid magical power, solid physical protection, the passive that increases your protections by 15 if you're healed, and then MP5. So no health, very low power, but solid protections. Not too bad. If you compare it to the other options as a first item, Renewal, Thebes, Manticore, it just doesn't hold up. Unfortunately, until Manticore and Renewal maybe or Thebes get nerfed, a lot of first items are just kind of dead. If you look at Sov, it was just like a 1 item compared to those. This one's really only worth more if they have like 4 solid physical gods in the enemy team. If they don't, you're just getting more value out of the Thebes, out of the Renewal, out of the Manticore. And the same thing can be said for Lotus. When this item is really good, like on Sylve, on Yamoja, on Terra, with its current stats, it's just overlooked by Sov. If they're playing 4 physicals, you're still just better off to build the Sov into a Renewal or whatever late game. So this item is good against physicals. As a healer, if you're not that, don't build it. And even if you are that, Sov is probably better right now. Magi's. Weird spot of it being, will you die if you get CC'd? That's kind of why you want to look for this item. Think of like Circuit. If you're a support and they're playing Circuit, if you get ulted, you die. If that's true, Magi's is actually a pretty good pickup. Fenrir, same thing. If you get jump stunned by Fenrir and then ulted, will you die? Magi is a good pickup. Magi feels a lot better early game, while Spirit's Robe is just kind of like the other option in the later game. 15% mitigation is solid at all points in the game, but a lot of the time, even in early game, if you're getting ulted by Fenrir, this 15% mitigation is going to be saving you. But this Magi's Cloak passive, where it's giving you a complete immunity for 1 second to get your dash off or whatever, is going to be pretty valuable. Both are good in if you get CC'd, you're dying, and it's good to avoid that. But currently, think of Magi's as slightly better early game, unless you're going to like turn and fight in the late game. Spirit's Robe is just better for being super tanky. Talisman. Gotta go fast! This item is kind of just, like you compare this item to Shogun's, and it's just night and day how much more useless Talisman is. You can see 30% attack speed at all times. Talisman, you're only getting 20% or 12%. Yeah, quick math. You're only getting 12% attack speed, but you're getting a little bit of movement speed, a little bit of MP5. But you have to play around the wave. And in Smite, playing around the wave is not something that is super useful past the early game. And this is not a first item rush. At best, you're going Sov into Talisman, and I think sometimes it used to feel okay in that spot. But now it's just Sov is kind of dead. Going into a magical item after that isn't really a thing because Manticore is statted so much better. Renewal is statted so much better. Thieves is statted so much better. I would stay away from Talisman. Even if it gets buffed, I think it's still going to be overlooked by Shoguns. But if you're planning on playing around waves and then rotating off those waves, it could be okay. Fey Blessed Hoops. Again, not really a counter item. It's mostly, this item is statted out of its mind right now. Do you have a heal? Yes. Do you need some magical protections? Yes. Build Fey Blessed Hoops. That's what it comes down to. This item is so broken because it's not something you have to play around. It's something your teammates have to play around. You just get your heal off. Even before getting your heal off, even if you don't have a heal to use the Fey Blessed passive, you're getting 60 magical procs, 350 health, 40 MP5, and 10% cooldown. This item is absolutely absurd for the stats it gives you. Like I said, if you're a healer and you need some semblance of magical protections, buy this item. If they have 5 physicals and you're playing Guan Yu, maybe you look elsewhere. But if they're playing 4 physicals and 1 mage in the mid lane, build 4 physical defense items and then a Fey Blessed and you will never die. Manticore. Where do we even start with this item? As it currently is, we'll talk about it in 2 ways. As it currently is, if you are building tanky or if you need any sort of protections, build this item. That's first off. If this item does not see a nerf, build this item no matter what. In maybe a month or even like 2 weeks, if it does get nerfed, think about this item in the fact of, do you have more than like 1 or 2 ways to proc it? So if this item gets nerfed down to say 25 procs or 25 procs and then like maybe 200 health, and you're playing Ares, maybe don't look to build this item because you're not having the passive being used at all. But if you're playing Cab and this is down to 25 procs each and 200 health, this item is still going to be super valuable with how many CCs you have and how often they're up. It's giving you a lot of spammability with MP5. It's giving you really good survivability with the procs and the health, and then it's just statted really well. And it's in this weird niche of being a hybrid item because it's giving you damage in the form of % health, which is absurd. And then it's giving you really good stats for a really cheap cost. So those are the 2 coins. Until the item gets nerfed, to build it every game on anyone that you need protections on. And then when it gets nerfed, if you have at least 2 ways to proc it, build Manticore. Genji's. As far as a support, I think Genji's is dead because it's just kind of outstatted and out-used by almost every other magical defense item in the game. If you think about what Genji's does, it gives you extra cooldowns, good magical protections, and cooldown reduction. That's its 3 things. Shoguns, cooldown, magical protections, and instead of extra cooldowns, it's giving your teammates 30% attack speed. I mean, kind of close. They're kind of doing the same thing, but Shoguns is just a lot better for your team. Genji's a bit more selfish. Okay, maybe you're playing a healer and you want your abilities up a little bit more so you can spam them a little bit. I mean, why not just look for Fey Blessed? It's giving you kind of the same amount of stats, except a good chunk more health, 200 more health, and then a passive you can actually abuse and doesn't have a 30-second cooldown. Oh, you want to just be a little bit extra tanky and you want some like MP5. Oh, okay. I mean, Onis. Let's build Onis. Genji's is kind of outstatted. I think maybe if it gets a buff in the cost, because I think the cost is what should go down, or maybe it becomes like a true magical defense item. I mean, even then, if it becomes a true magical defense item, like it becomes as tanky as possible against magicals. This one's against magicals and physicals. And then Bulwark, which we're going to get to, is just better kind of overall. It's giving you a shield. So Genji's, I think, is probably dead in support. I don't know too much about it in solo. I think like maybe some gods use it pretty well, like Arthur, because your base cooldowns are pretty low anyway, and you can just spam a little bit more. But yeah, I would try to stay away from Genji's a little bit. And even if it does get buffed, I would still probably stay away from it. Hide of the Nemean. Are you building a lot of prots? and do the enemies rely on those first couple of basics to kill you? So you're playing against 3 hunters and an Athena, and she's going to dash taunt you and try to auto you, or they're going to try to auto you when you're dash taunted. Neemian has a lot of strength in a game like that. I think Neemian currently has a strength against a lot of comps because it's just reducing auto attack damage from 3 different sources, and it stacks pretty quick. The only problem I see with Neemian is some items just are better than what you need from this one, because this is a selfish item. So it's more of a solo lane item, but if you're playing against a lot of physicals, or you're playing against a Hydra's character that you're like, this guy's going to one-shot me if I don't have Neemian, that's the only time I'd really look for Neemian. It's fine, but it's just a lot more niche. We've talked about Shoguns a couple times, but does your team use the attack speed you get from Shoguns really well? 99% of the time, the answer is yes. The 1% is there a better option someplace else? You're playing a more of a dive comp, Manticore might be a little bit better. You're a healer, Fabulous might be a little bit better. You're getting crit, Spectral might be a little bit better. But I cannot think of a single scenario where Shoguns is an actual bad option in a game, unless maybe they have 5 physicals and then you just don't need it. Toxic Blade, not really support item. Voidstone, I just don't think this item does enough to warrant it being picked up. Reducing physical or magical protections by 10% is good, but the stats on it are just pretty meh all around. 40 power's fine, but for a magical, it's not great. 50 magical protections is, I mean, it's good. It's not terrible. 200 health is good. I mean, not terrible. But a lot of the times it's just outdone by other items. If you want to do extra damage, just build Mana Core. I mean, if you want to do extra damage, just build Genjis or Shoguns for the cooldown instead, so you can have abilities up more often. A lot of the times, unless you're playing like 3 magicals where you're playing Guardian, support, Magical Hunter, Magical Mid Laner, maybe Voidstone is fine at that spot, but even then, you might just be better off getting Shoguns, so your team's just doing more auto-attack damage, so you have more damage in that way. Void probably needs some love to be buffed, but the only time I'd really buy it is if you're playing 3 magicals, and you just need the extra damage. Pesty, I talked about it with Contagion. It's just a little bit more expensive. 2250 for only 2 stats, even though both stats are good, is expensive, especially considering how much I talked up all these other magical defense items. I think it just leads to Pesty being overlooked. I guess if it gets to a point where it's a little bit stronger, and if they have 4 or 5 healers on the enemy team, Pesty might be okay. But other than that spot, I wouldn't really look to build it. Gaia. I think this item is a bit underrated right now, and I don't think people really utilize it as well as they should. The passive that I like about it is this one, where you're regenerating 0.5% of your max health every second. It might not seem like a lot, but if you're comboing that with the HP 5 you get from this item, the HP 5 you're probably getting from other items, and then the passive if you get knocked up, it actually comes out to being a lot of health healed. And then it's also giving you a lot of base health for stats. The one downside is the cost of it. 2250 is very expensive, so it's not really something you want to look for. 2nd, 3rd, 4th item even. But like as a 5th and final item, Gaia might be really sick for sieges and anti-sieges because it allows you to take a little bit of poke, dish out a little bit of poke with your team, and then back up and heal. Bulwark. Do you want to be as tanky as possible with one item against magicals? Bulwark is the buy. It's a little bit more expensive than Oni's, but if you truly want to be as tanky as possible against magicals, Bulwark is the best option. Pythags. Less of a counter building thing and more of just like a support thing in general. Do you have a good amount of survivability, and will you make good use of the Pythags in terms of power and the aura? Kabrakan was really good with it because he had survivability in his passive, and then he just gets a little bit of extra damage on his abilities, and it makes him just kind of be able to 1v2, 1v3. You also want to fight around the Kabrakan, so it's not something you're going to be split pushing like an Athena or not around your team. So I think Pythags is in a spot where if you have a good amount of survivability, you don't use other items as well, you make good use of the power, Pythags is good. I think the biggest negative with Pythags now is since they buff Manticore, you kind of don't have a spot for Pythags because Thebes into Pythags is just kind of going to be outdone by Renewal into Manticore or Manticore into Renewal. But I think Pythags is okay. Breastplate. Do you need physical defense and do you need cooldown? Yes. Are you playing like Umoja and they have 4 physicals? Yes. Build Breastplate of Valor. If not, don't build it. Build a cooldown item elsewhere. Build Pridwin. Even though I'm a bit of a Pridwin hater and I prefer going like Spirit's Orb and stuff like that, I think the 20% cooldown items in support are pretty bait worthy unless you're playing Umoja. And then even a lot of time, if you want 20% cooldown, just go Chronos Pendant. Midgard. This item is just statted so bad. Compare it to Witchblade, looking at the stats of it, 300 health, 40 protections, and then auto attack speed and movement speed reduced. And you have to get hit for this to take effect. This one is just standing around them, reducing it by 25%, and then you're getting cooldown, and then you're getting slightly less procs, slightly less health, but it's giving you movement speeds to survivability, and it's giving you cooldown, and it's cheaper. Midgard needs kind of like the same thing that like Talisman needs. They're both just outdated items and just outdone by newer, better items. Stone of Foul. Are you able to get some auto attacks down on the enemy? Cabrakan, Ymir, Sylvanas, stuff like that. I think it can be okay. A lot of times it's just outdone by other items. It's not really a good rush item. It doesn't scale too well into the late game, and it doesn't help your team too much either. But I do think it's a bit underbought. I think gods like Cabrakan can actually use this item and abuse it. But other than that, I do think it's a bit underwhelming. Gauntlet of Thebes. Are you playing support? Is it your first item? You can build Thebes. Realistically, Thebes right now is just outdone by Renewal, but it's always just going to be a safe option because it's giving your teammates 10 protections once you're finished being stacked, and it's giving you healthy. It's giving you protections also. So it's fine right now, but it's just outdone by Renewal. There's no scenario where I'm like, this is something you want to build. There's really no counter building of this item. It's just, do you want to build Thebes? The one time I think Thebes is kind of like a counter build item is if you're planning on building a damage item second that's just no survivability. If you're planning on building like a Divine, I think Thebes into Divine is a lot better than Renewal into Divine or Manticore into Divine. But it's barely better, so even then, Renewal might slightly just outdo it just because it's something you can build earlier. But yeah, if you're building a damage item second, I do think Thebes is slightly better. Renewal. Until this item gets nerfed, it's going to be the best support item. A lot of people are really infatuated with Manticore, but I think everything about male Renewal is just really good paired with Manticore. Like, these items together are just giving you bloated stats, 65 protections of each, 550 health, HP 5, MP 5, extra damage, extra healing. Like, they're just like the yin to the yang of, are you playing support? Do you want 2 items? Do you want to be strong in 2 items? Build Renewal and then build Manticore, or build Manticore and then build Renewal. And I mean, I don't know what to just like say about this item. Even if it gets nerfed, if it loses like those 10 protections again, the downside is it's super expensive. But even if you lose those protections, you're still getting a ton of health. The only time I wouldn't really build this is if your team's super reliant on healing, like you have a Hell mid, Vomana maybe in the jungle, and they're going to be building a lot of anti-heal. Male Renewal's a lot worse. But even after that, it's statted so well that you can just buy it. Pridwin. Currently, as it is, do you need the 20% cooldown? Basically, are you playing Umoja? If you're playing Umoja, then build it. Otherwise, not. If it gets to a point where it sees a small buff to either its protections going up from 90 to like 100, maybe 110, or the damage going up a little bit, probably don't pick it up at all. If and when it does get buffed, do you need the cooldown? Do you need a little extra damage, a little extra survivability? The item will be in a really healthy spot, but yeah, currently, I don't think it's great. Mystical Mail. It's not really a counter build item. It's more of a, do you need some damage and a badly statted item that's really expensive, then this is the place to be. Spirit Robe. I talked about it a little bit. Are you going to die off of getting CC'd? Are you super tanky? You want to be a little bit extra tanky? That's kind of the niche of Spirit's Robe. Ethereal Staff. Do you want to be, or do you want an item that's a little bit of hybrid? And can you use the Ethereal Staff well? 3rd, 4th, 5th item, are you 2 items deep, 3 items deep, and you're really tanky and you just want some semblance of extra damage or to take away from their team's extra tankiness? Ethereal's perfect. But can you also proc it? If you're playing Ymir, you can't really proc it. If you're playing Terra, you have pretty good time proccing it because you can just clap your 2. Are you playing Fafnir? Really easy time proccing it. You walk up, you want somebody, you get an E-Staff proc. If they try to commit to you, you jump away. E-Staff, perfect. Last 2 items. Jade Emperors. Are you playing against a physical team that is really reliant on their physical power, an AMC mid, and a assassin and soul lane that's building a lot of damage? This item is really good. It is very good into the late game. It's not great early game. And then it's also really expensive. Mantle. I think Mantle's kind of in a dead spot currently. It's kind of just worse than Spirit's Robe or worse than Magi's. The only time I think it could be good is if they're playing like Fenrir with like a really long CC and you need the extra tankiness stats from it, and you want the immunity to be able to live and get your ult off or something. I think it could be good. Like if you're playing Geb and you want that extra just CC. You're worried about getting interrupted before casting your ultimate, or like Kepri, you're worried about getting CC'd before your ultimate goes off. I think Mantle can be okay. But other than that, I think a lot of the times you're better off with a Magi's or a Spirit's Robe. But there it is. There's like 30-something items that I just spent 30 minutes talking about. I hope you guys enjoyed this little counter building discussion. Let me know if I missed something or if you're curious about something, let me know. But before we finish the video, we're also going to jump into 3 team comps from my ranked games today, where I will just tell you guys kind of what I would want to build and why. So in this game, my support is a Horus, and he's playing against Poseidon, Raven, Apollo, Achilles support, and Tsukuyomi. So they have 4 physicals. If I was playing Horus, something like this game, I would probably start off with just a simple renewal because It's just this really statted well item. I guess I should start with my starter. I would go Benevolence into Renewal. Benevolence is just super strong right now. It scales into Compassion, which is also super strong. And then Renewal is just a really good survivability item. Like I said, even if you're playing against 4 physicals, even if Sov is sometimes a better early game option, Renewal is just a lot better in the mid game, a lot better late game. And then even sometimes it can be a difference maker in team fights. We also don't have like any real healing in our comp, so they're not going to really build anti-heal. So I would go Benevolence into Renewal into Manticore. I want to help my team do a little bit extra damage. I want some good cheap stats, and it's just a perfect option. Because we started snowballing this game and then we started to throw a little bit, I went Emperor's Third. Horus isn't really a god reliant on cooldown. If you get ahead, you can kind of just use your damage and one-shot ability to abuse that instead of just using a lot of it for CC. So I went Emperors to try to snowball the game. It allowed me to go into Compassion 3rd, 4th. I can't count. It allowed me to go Compassion 4th because then I'm good on magical and physical protections, and it opens up the rest of my build. After that, it would kind of just be what I prefer. Depending on my relics, maybe Relic Dagger. Depending on my survivability, maybe Spirit's Robe. Mantle just to be able to get an extra ability off in the late game, my 3 to live. And then Shogun's just probably help my team a little bit more because I think it's just a really good ranked item. So that's probably what I'd look for this game. In the next game, it's a Terra support against Yu Wong, Raven, Baron, Guan, and Artemis. So they have a good chunk of healing. Relic-wise, I'd probably go on Ankh this game. I didn't really talk about relics for the last one, but like Sunder is really good. I probably would have thought about Sunder as Horus. Meditation is always good. Frenzy's good for objectives on Horus. Shell's always good. Sprint is fine. I probably would have gone for just Shell and like Sunder's probably, but yeah. So for this one, Terra playing against double healers. I probably would have looked for the Ankh. I would have gone something like Sentinels this game into Thebes into Divine, because I would have thought that my team isn't really someone I can peel for with my ult or just like keep them alive so they can get away. It's mostly we are taking this fight here and we're going to win it because we have a Merlin. So I would look for the Divine Thebes combo. And then I would go something to help the team out a little bit more via my damage. Something like a Shogun's. I would have gone into Sentinel's Embrace to help the team with just some extra protections. And then I would have gone into an Emperor's for team fighting under Phoenixes or on their Phoenixes. And lastly, I would have gone something Mantle or Spirit's Robe for some survivability, maybe the Magi's. And then I would have gone Blink for some semblance of engage if we needed it. We don't have great engage via CC. We have a Nem. We have Arthur, who's okay. So I would have just wanted to be that second option maybe. Looking at game 3, we are playing Ganesh against Horus, Chiron, Geb, Owilix, and Poseidon. Another Poseidon. Had a couple Poseidon gamers today. First off, I wouldn't play Ganesh, but for those out there that do enjoy Ganesh, he's a very good user of Manticore. He's a very good user of Renewal. I probably would have gone Benevolence into Renewal into Manticore. And a little thing I'm seeing from what I'm talking about is a lot of the time your first 2 items aren't really counter building in support. It's first 2 items are just what is the best 2 items in the game. Currently, it is just Renewal into Manticore. So every game, that is just something you can build, and it'll just feel really, really good. But Benevolence, Renewal, Manticore. Next up, looking at their comp. They are mostly a defensive comp. I don't really need too much to stop their dive. Owilix is a weird dive god in the late game. Same with Horus. I probably would look to build some sort of damage because I don't have to worry about my health. I could also just 2 if I ever get blinked on, and then be in a fine spot where I can't get knocked up, and it would interrupt Horus too. So I would have probably gone something along the lines of Chronos Pendant for just some super high CC, cooldown and then damage. And then Compassion into a Spirit's Robe for just in case I did get CC'd. And then probably another damage item on top. If Deso was stronger, I'd probably go Deso, but I probably just thought about E-Staff or something like that. And then Relics, I would have gone Med and then just Shell, just because I didn't really need anything else beyond that and just keep my team alive. And we probably win the fights. So those are just my thoughts on what I would be building in these comps. Also, if you liked this part of the video, let me know if you want to just see some more of them so I can just add some more information out there. Let me know. Mario, I'm sorry about the length of the video. I've been hitting you with these bangers recently, but hey, they've been enjoying it. Make sure you guys, if you guys enjoyed the video, if you watched a lot of the way through, make sure you guys leave a like. Make sure you're subscribed. I couldn't say subscribed. Subscribed, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. See ya.